Assembly, House Bill 1400 simply would have taken early voting from 15 days before an election down to 7. In discussion, there was one auditor that said he'd like at least 8 days to prepare for the election, I guess, so we amended it to 8 days. And then after discussion in committee, we believed that the 15 days was working just fine, so on a vote 8-4-2, we recommend a do not pass and hope you concur. Thank you.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, the House has before it for final consideration House Bill 1400. The clerk will open the key and you may record your vote. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Key will be closed and the clerk will take the record. Final vote shows 13 yea, 80 nay, 1 absent, not voting. House Bill 1400 is declared failed. Continuing on the 11th, Representative Vigasaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the 8th order, I move that House Bill 1332, which is on the 11th order of today's calendar, be moved to the top of the order.
Questions on the motion by Representative Vigasaw that House Bill 1332 be moved to the top of the calendar. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. The House has before it House Bill 1332, which has been read. Mr. Chief Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, re-engrossed House Bill 1332, introduced by Representative Baining and other House and Senate sponsors. Re-engrossed House Bill 1332 is a bill for an act to amend and reenact Section 16.1-02-05, subsection 9 of Section 16.1-02-12, and Section 16.1-02-13, 16.1-05-04, 16.1-05-07, 16.1-07-06, and 39-06-03.1 of the North Dakota Century Code relating to eligibility to vote, to repeal Section 16.1-05-06 and 58-04-09 of the North Dakota Century Code relating to eligibility to vote. Mr. Speaker, your Appropriations Committee recommends amendments which are passed on the previous 6th order. When so recommends do pass on an amended House Bill 1332 by a vote of 17 yeas, 4 nays, 1 absent, and 0 not voting. Mr. Speaker.
Representative Thorson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members of the Assembly. House Bill 1332 came to the Appropriations Committee from your Government and Veterans Affairs Committee with a do pass recommendation. Your Appropriations Committee looked at it for the fiscal impact and made no changes. However, there was an amendment brought forward by the bill sponsor which was not adopted in the GVA Committee, and so the Appropriations Committee did adopt an amendment which was passed on the previous 6th order, which throughout the bill removes photo when dealing with the identification types. So that is a change that the Appropriations Committee made with this bill at the request of the sponsor. And I will ask that the carrier of the bill from the Government and Veterans Affairs Committee explain the rest of the bill.
Representative Carls.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and members of the Assembly, House Bill 1332 is about protecting the integrity of the vote in North Dakota. Your GVA committee learned there were 10,519 voter affidavits submitted in the 2012 election. 10,519 individuals came to the polling place without identification. They came without a driver's license, a utility bill with their current address, without a valid student ID, without a military ID, a tribal ID, or could not be vouched for by a poll worker. Over 10,000 voters completed a voter affidavit certifying under oath their identity and their residency in the precinct. Their votes were counted, and your county auditors had to handle the paperwork to verify addresses with a follow-up postcard after the election to determine residence. If any of these affidavits were found to be fraudulent, there was no way to retrieve the ballot from the ballot box and uncount the votes. I want to refer to a handout that you all have on your desks. One is from our Secretary of State's office, Deputy Secretary Jim Silram. Another one is an email from the Cass County Auditor dealing with this bill. House Bill 1332 will assure that all qualified voters in North Dakota will have the right to vote by requiring an ID to vote. Elderly voters who don't possess the IDs prescribed in this bill will be provided one through the mail. We have worked to make sure that if an ID is required to vote, every qualified elector has access to obtain an ID for voting, and providing it before voting is far more efficient for the voter and for the election administrators. Mr. Speaker and members of the Assembly, this bill provides no barriers to voting. It puts everyone on an even playing field, giving confidence to all voters that the votes are being cast by qualified electors of our state. It is supported by our Secretary of State's office and by county auditors. Your GVA gave this bill a 10-4 do pass recommendation, and we ask that you concur. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, the House has before it for final consideration House Bill 1332. The clerk will open the key and you may record your vote. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? The key will be closed and the clerk will take the record. The final record shows 72 yea, 21 nay, 1 absent, not voting. House Bill 1332 is declared passed. Continuing on the 11th order of business. The House says before it, there we go. House Bill 1418, which has been read. Mr. Chief Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, House Bill 1418, introduced by Representative Kay Koppelman and other House and Senate sponsors. House Bill 1418 is a bill for an act to create and enact a new section to Chapter 16.1-05 of the Century Code relating to the appointment of poll checkers, to amend and reenact Section 16.1-02-05, 16.1-05-04, 16.1-05-07, 16.1-10-06.1, 16.1-15-06, 16.1-15-08, and 58-04-09 of the North Dakota Century Code relating to verification of eligibility of voters, to repeal Section 16.1-05-06 of the North Dakota Century Code relating to challenging the right to vote. Mr. Speaker, your Government and Veterans Affairs Committee recommends do not pass on House Bill 1418 by a vote of 11 yeas, 2 nays, 1 absent, and 0 not voting. Mr. Speaker.
Representative Steiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the House. Your Government and Veterans Affairs Committee did vote do not pass on 1418 by an 11-2 vote. Much respect to my Chairman of Judiciary for his great insight into this bill. However, this bill expands the requirements for an affidavit used in voting. With the passage of the previous Bill 1332, this bill isn't needed because the affidavit language is no longer needed. By a vote of 11-2, your Government and Veterans Affairs Committee gave this bill a do not pass, and we ask the body to concur. Mr. Speaker.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, the House has before it for final consideration House Bill 1418. The clerk will open the key and you may record your vote. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Key will be closed and clerk will take the record. Final vote shows 5 yea, 88 nay, 1 absent and not voting. House Bill 1418 is declared failed. Resolution 3038 is declared passed. Continuing on the 11th order of business, the House has before it House Bill 1275, which has been read. Mr. Chief Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, engrossed House Bill 1275, introduced by Representatives Casper and other House and Senate sponsors. Engrossed House Bill 1275 is a bill for an act to create and enact a new section to Chapter 16.1-05 of the North Dakota Century Code relating to the appointment of poll checkers, to amend and reenact Section 16.1-02-05, 16.1-05-04, 16.1-05-07, and 16.1-10-06.1 of the North Dakota Century Code relating to verification of eligibility of voters, to repeal Section 16.1-05-06 and 58-04-09 of the North Dakota Century Code relating to challenging the right to vote and to provide a penalty. Mr. Speaker, your Government and Veterans Affairs Committee recommends amendments which are passed on the previous sixth order. When so amended and engrossed, recommends do pass on engrossed House Bill 1275 by a vote of 9 yeas, 4 nays, 1 absent, and 0 not voting. Mr. Speaker.
Representative Rohr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and members of the Assembly, House Bill 1275 also addressed the requirement for voter ID. Since we just passed House Bill 1332 requiring voter identification, we no longer need House Bill 1275. Let's kill this bill and vote red.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, the House has before it House Bill 1275. The clerk will open the key and you may record your vote. Has every member voted? Representative Martinson? Every member voted. Does any member wish to change their vote? Key will be closed. The clerk will take the record. The final vote shows 1 yea, 92 nay, 1 absent, not voting. House Bill 1275 is declared failed. Representative Hawken.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May we be on the 8th order?
We are on the 8th order.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to ask for reconsideration of House Bill 1265. I was on the prevailing side.
Mr. Chief Clerk, please check the record as whether Representative Hawken was on the prevailing side.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, Representative Hawken voted nay, and the bill had failed, so she was on the prevailing side.
Mr. Speaker, I would move that we reconsider our actions on House Bill 1265.
Representative Hawken voted on the prevailing side, made the motion to reconsider our action. Is there any discussion? The question is on the motion of Representative Hawken to reconsider his action by which House Bill 1265 failed. Rule 347 requires a verification vote for all motions to reconsider. The clerk will open the key for the verification vote. (1447), which has been read. Mr. Chief Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, engrossed House Bill 1447, introduced by Representative Mock and other House and Senate sponsors. Engrossed House Bill 1447 is a bill for an act to amend and reenact subsection 3 of section 16.1-08.1-02 and all sections and subsections related to 16.1-08.1 of the North Dakota Century Code relating to campaign contribution and expenditure reports and reporting deadlines to provide an effective date. Mr. Speaker, this had a fiscal note prepared by the Secretary of State, and the analysis indicates that the amendment proposed for the bill removes a fiscal impact of $50,000, which would have been the situation if the bill had not been amended. Mr. Speaker, your Government and Veterans Affairs Committee recommends amendments which were passed on the previous 6th order. When so amended and engrossed, recommends do pass on engrossed House Bill 1447 by a vote of 13 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent, and 0 not voting. Mr. Speaker.
Representative Lauser.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the Assembly. House Bill 1447 was brought to us essentially due to early and absentee voting. The bill moves campaign contribution and expenditure reporting requirements from the 12th day before the day of the election to the 32nd day before the day of the election, and it changes the reporting period itself, leaving in place the beginning of the calendar year and changing to the 40th day before the day of the election rather than the 20th day of the day before the election. You'll see these two changes referenced consistently throughout the bill. This bill does leave intact the current 8-day window from the end of the reporting period to the deadline for filing the report and simply adjusts the dates. Also, the bill requires that the Secretary of State shall implement a system through which any statement required by this chapter be filed electronically. The Secretary of State testified in committee that his office is already working on the system. The bill was introduced with the date of February 1st, 2014 for completion and amended to May 1st of the same year. Mr. Speaker, and your GVA committee recommends a do pass on House Bill 1447. Thank you.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, the House has before it for final consideration House Bill 1447. The clerk will open the key and you may record your vote. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? The key will be closed. The clerk will take the record. The final vote shows 87 yeas, 6 nay, 1 absent, not voting. House Bill 1447 is declared passed. Continuing on the 11th order of business, the House has before it House Bill 1430, which has been read. Mr. Chief Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, House Bill 1430, introduced by Representative Grishala and other House and Senate sponsors. House Bill 1430 is a bill for an act to amend and reenact section 16.1-08.1 and -01, 16.1-08 16.1-03.3 and 16.1-08.1-03.5 and 16.1-08.1-03.12 and 16.1-08.1-05 of the North Dakota Century Code relating to campaign contributions and expenses and to provide a penalty. Mr. Speaker, your Government and Veterans Affairs Committee recommends do not pass on House Bill 1430 by a vote of 10 yeas, 3 nays, 1 absent, and 0 not voting. Mr. Speaker.
Representative Steiner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members of the House. Your Government and Veterans Affairs Committee voted 10-3 do not pass on House Bill 1430. This bill relates to campaign contributions and expenditures. This bill, 1430, is almost identical in concepts as a 21-page bill that's coming over from the Senate, 2299, which passed the Senate 43-4. The Senate bill is a combination of another bill, 2346, which the minority leader in the Senate brought, and the Secretary of State's bill, 2299. So those two have been combined, and they'll be coming over after crossover, and it's almost identical. Some of the concepts in here are almost identical. The committee agreed that because the bill was so similar and it was already included in the Senate version that we would need to duplicate and move the bill forward. So your Government and Veterans Affairs Committee voted 10-3 do not pass on House Bill 1430 and respectfully ask the House to concur. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there any discussion? Representative Mock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and members of the Assembly, I don't actually intend to speak on the bill, but I just want to reference that Section 111 of our Mason's rules indicate that it is irregular and unparliamentary for us to discuss any bill in the other chamber for the purposes of influencing the vote in this chamber. So I just wanted to remind the Assembly that we have the bill before us, and regardless of whether the Senate has passed or defeated a bill, that we must act on the motion before us, and that's the only thing that we should be considering. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Mock. Is there any further discussion? Representative Gruchella.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the Assembly, if you like the way the last election was conducted, this is not your bill. If you are like me and didn't like the way large political action committees came into our state and ran deceptive commercials for and against candidates and then say they are not affiliated with any candidate, this bill is for you. This bill forces any money or anything of value made for a political purpose or for the direct purpose of influencing passage or defeat of a measure to be disclosed. This bill spells out what an independent expenditure is. It also includes any organization governed by Section 501 of the IRS Code. This bill states that any activity undertaken during the period 30 days before a primary and 60 days before a special or general election has to be disclosed. This bill directs that a political action committee shall report the occupation, employer, and principal place of business of each individual who contributed $5,000 or more in the aggregate. This bill will shine the light on the dark side of political campaigns and make our election process more open and hopefully prevent elections from being bought. For those of you who like to quote the Constitution, remember, ours is a government for the people, not for the corporation or political action committees that are dominating the election process. Members of the Assembly, if you want fairer, more open elections, this bill is for you. Let the sun shine in. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the House has before it for final consideration House Bill 1430. The clerk will open the key and you may record your vote. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Key will be closed. The clerk will take the record. The final vote shows 25 yeas, 67 nay, 2 absent, not voting. House Bill 1430 is declared failed. Continuing on the 11th order of business, House has before it House Bill 1436, which has been read. Mr. Chief Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, House Bill 1436, introduced by Representative Gugasberg and other House and Senate sponsors. House Bill 1436 is a bill for an act to amend and reenact subsection 4 of section 16.1-08.1-02 of the North Dakota Century Code relating to campaign contribution reporting requirements. Mr. Speaker, your Government and Veterans Affairs Committee recommends do not pass on House Bill 1436 by a vote of 10 yeas, 3 nays, 1 absent, and 0 not voting. Mr. Speaker.
Representative Carls.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and members of the Assembly, House Bill 1436 proposes additional reporting requirements for candidates for the legislature. Currently, legislative and statewide candidates file with the Secretary of State this information: the date, name, and mailing address of all contributors who contributed in excess of $200, in the aggregate during the reporting period. A complete statement for each calendar year no later than the 31st day of January of the following year, and the occupation, employer, and principal place of business of each person who contributed $5,000 or more in the aggregate during the reporting period. And I can guarantee you not many of us legislators have to do that one. House Bill 1436 would require adding the gross total of all contributions received in excess of $200, the gross total of all contributions received of $200 or less, and the cash on hand in the filer's account at the start and the close of the reporting period. This would bring reporting requirements of legislative races to the same level as statewide races. Your GVA committee felt there is a vast difference between a statewide race and a legislative race, and that these additional requirements are not necessary. By a vote of 10-3, your GVA committee recommends a do not pass. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there any discussion? Representative Guggisberg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and members of the Assembly, Representative Carls did a great job of explaining the bill. The bill, all it would do is would require us to report our gross totals that we raise when we're collecting money for our campaign, and also the cash on hand we have in our campaign account at the end of the year. Doesn't seem too intrusive. When I was in the committee, the question came up, well, do you think this is a big problem? Do you hear from a lot of your constituents about this? And the truth is, no, I don't. But that doesn't mean that it's right. And in fact, when I explain to people our contribution laws, they don't believe it. It's atrocious to them, especially people in politics outside of our state. They can't believe that we don't have to do this minimum reporting. And I think if we want to be more transparent, we can add this one little level to the reporting we do. And it's not that I don't trust you, but in the words of former President Ronald Reagan, trust but verify.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the House has before it for final consideration House Bill 1436. The clerk will open the key and you may record your vote. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Representative Boucher, is there any member wish to change their vote? The key will be closed. The clerk will take the record. The final vote shows 24 yea, 69 nay, 1 absent, not voting. House Bill 1436 is declared failed. Continuing on the 11th order of business, House has before it House Bill 1449, which has been read. Mr. Chief Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, House Bill 1449, introduced by Representative Boucher and other House and Senate sponsors. House Bill 1449 is a bill for an act to amend and reenact subsection 4 of section 16.1-08.1-02 of the North Dakota Century Code relating to campaign contributions and expenditure reporting requirements. Mr. Speaker, your Government and Veterans Affairs Committee recommends do not pass on House Bill 1449 by a vote of 10 yeas, 3 nays, 1 absent, and 0 not voting. Mr. Speaker.
Representative B. Koppelman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members of the Assembly. House Bill 1449 seeks to add reporting requirements for candidates for statewide and legislative office. For statewide candidates and their respective campaign committees, this bill would require that reporting of the aggregated total of all expenditures in the excess of $200 made to any person, the mailing address of the person, the date of the most recent expense made to the person, and the purpose for which the aggregate expenditure total was distributed to the person. In addition to the aforementioned new requirements for statewide candidates, this bill would also require legislative candidates and their respective committees to report a gross total of all contributions received in excess of $200, to report the gross total of all contributions received of $200 or less, and to report the cash on hand in the filer's account at the start and the close of the reported period. In testimony from the bill's sponsor, we heard that according to his experience campaigning door to door, that his constituents are concerned about who we as candidates are receiving donations from and how we are spending those donations. He went on to say that some of his constituents even referred to rumors of elected officials using their campaign funds to pay their mortgage,
car payments, and other bills. The bill's sponsor was the only individual to testify in this bill and did not provide documentation indicating misuse of campaign funds. In committee discussion, concerns were raised that the bill would amount to a disclosure of a candidate's campaign plan, and that this information would only be useful to the candidate's opponent and the opposing party for political gain. In the case where a district political party would serve as the campaign committee for a candidate, the concern was raised that the district committee would have to disclose all of its expenditures and whether this was applicable to an individual race. This bill could also damage relationships between a candidate and vendors or print shops when they often can only choose one but are not looking to offend anyone. Overall, the committee determined that our current reporting requirements are adequate and that there was not a critical problem that needed to be addressed. With a vote of 10-3, your Committee on Government and Veterans Affairs recommends do not pass and requests the concurrence of the Assembly. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there any discussion? Representative Boucher.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members of the Assembly. As the bill carrier indicated, this was introduced based on the fact that questions were raised during campaigning. I think it's interesting that we have a concern with our own transparency as elected officials, yet we continue to ask political subdivisions and other government entities to provide clarity in how they're spending money. The difference there, of course, is that they are using public funds, but as people who will be dispensing of those public funds and who allocate how those funds are used, I think it's a good indicator when people see how we're using our personal funds for the purposes of campaigning. I think this is a good bill. I think it's a bill that puts some ease for voters and people who continue to see more and more outside influences in how we in how we campaign, how we're using our campaign funds, and whether or not we're using those in the appropriate manner. So I'd ask for a couple green lights so we could pass this on and show the voters in North Dakota that we have nothing to hide as elected officials. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the House has before it for final consideration House Bill 1449. The clerk will open the key and you may record your vote. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Key will be closed. The clerk will take the record. The final vote shows 21 yeas, 72 nay, 1 absent, not voting. House Bill 1449 is declared failed. Continuing on the 11th order of business, the House has before it House Bill 1444, which has been read. Mr. Chief Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, House Bill 1444, introduced by Representative Mahoney and other House and Senate sponsors. House Bill 1444 is a bill for an act to create and enact a new subsection to Section 16.1-09-03 of the North Dakota Century Code relating to information required to be filed in statements of interest to amend and reenact Sections 54-05.1-02 of the North Dakota Century Code relating to legislative lobbying. Mr. Speaker, your Government and Veterans Affairs Committee recommends do not pass on House Bill 1444 by a vote of 10 yeas, 3 nays, 1 absent, and 0 not voting. Mr. Speaker.
Representative Rohr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and members of the Assembly, your Government and Veterans Affairs Committee recommends a do not pass on House Bill 1444 by a vote of 10-3 with 1 absent. House Bill 1444 relates to legislative lobbying. There presently are a number of organizations who attempt to bring legislators and others from around the country to sit down together, discuss public policy issues that exist in pretty much all states, and try to find a way to address those issues by sharing information and discussing the issues. One example is the National Conference of Commissioners on Uniform State Laws. There are legislators, judges, and private attorneys in the state who are commissioners and regularly attend these meetings and discuss possible new ways of addressing issues through the legislative process. These individuals then bring these ideas back to the state, and we as legislators adopt some and reject some. However, we have access to research and analysis by experts around the country. What House Bill 1444 would do is place restrictions and obstacles to the utilization of these national groups by adding reporting requirements and requiring various people involved in this process to register as lobbyists. Furthermore, the majority of your GVA committee believes the changes proposed in this legislation would stifle the free flow of information through these limitations. A lobbyist testified in opposition to this bill, and in his testimony he indicated that he already files a report with any expenditures spent on legislators greater than $60 with the Secretary of State, and that the existing law is sufficient. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the Assembly, By a 10-3 vote, your Government and Veterans Affairs Committee has determined this is a solution looking for a problem, and the unanticipated consequences of any passage would be to limit involvement of North Dakota legislators and national groups attempting to craft solutions to legislative problems. We ask you to vote red.
Is there any discussion? Representative Mooney.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and ladies and gentlemen of the House. Over the past several weeks, it's been interesting to see the number of bills that have come forward with relation to holding our local government and agencies accountable, and with the supposed intent of greater transparency. We've looked at bills that would ask that all local entities report directly to the state as a central portal for all information, have asked them to detail out even further than they already are doing, the tax as well as the state aid distribution per taxpayer. And there's been quite a lengthy list, really, of what we would like to see on a local level for transparency and accountability. And yet, when we come to our own house and we ask for, whether you want to call it ethics, accountability, transparency, all of those words really all fall together. But when we start talking about that here, we find not only reluctance, but really a resistance towards that, because really everything is fine the way it is. And you know, that very well may be. This bill is just one more in a layer that would add to the benefit of knowledge going forward for people who elect us. I know that I, for one, wish for my people, anybody who has donated to my campaign, anybody who has voted for me, anybody who has not voted for me, I want them to know that I work with integrity, and that when I'm out, and if I'm with a lobbyist, if I'm in their home turf or whatever the case may be, if I'm in an educational format, and if I've received any money as reimbursement for my travels or whatever the case may be, that there's a legitimate reason, there's a legitimate purpose for this. So when I look at things like this, I don't see this as a negative. I really see it as a way that we can make ourselves more available to the people that we represent. So that was my take on this bill. As Representative Boucher said beforehand, and some of my other colleagues, I really see this as a way to be able to make ourselves available. I think it's a good process. I think it's a good bill. And I would hope that we would be willing at some point to put ourselves in the same position and be the example that we ask of our political subdivisions themselves. Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members of the House.
Is there any further discussion? Representative Scarpel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Mooney yield to a question?
Representative Mooney, would you yield to a question?
I would.
Representative Scarpel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Mooney, is there anything preventing you from doing just what you want right now?
No, sir, there's not, and I will. Thank you.
Is there further discussion? Seeing none, the House has before it for final consideration House Bill 1444. The clerk will open the key and you may record your vote. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Key will be closed. The clerk will take the record. Final vote shows 22 yeas, 71 nay, 1 absent, not voting. House Bill 1444 is declared failed. Continuing on the 11th order of business. The House has before it House Bill 1442, which has been read. Mr. Chief Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, House Bill 1442, introduced by Representative Mock and other House and Senate sponsors. House Bill 1442 is a bill for an act to create and enact a new section to Chapter 54-06 of the North Dakota Century Code relating to the establishment of a state ethics commission and to provide a penalty. Mr. Speaker, this is a fiscal note prepared by the Legislative Council. Their analysis indicates that the estimated fiscal impact cannot be determined. Mr. Speaker, your Government and Veterans Affairs Committee recommends do not pass on House Bill 1442 by vote of 10 yeas, 3 nays, 1 absent, and 0 not voting. Mr. Speaker.
Representative Casper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the Assembly. House Bill 1442 is a bill that would establish an ethics commission in North Dakota. The ethics commission would be comprised of 1, 4 members of the legislative branch appointed by the legislature, 2, 5 additional members appointed by the governor, 1 from the Republican Party, 1 from the Democrat Party, and 3 members who serve or have served in an elected or appointed position in the judicial branch. These 9 members would make up the State Ethics Commission. The bill requires that if any ethics complaint submitted by anyone in writing is filed with the Ethics Commission, that the Ethics Commission shall investigate the complaint if a majority of the Commission approves to do so. During the Ethics Commission's deliberation, the records and proceedings are confidential and not subject to North Dakota open records law. However, at the conclusion of the Ethics Commission deliberation, and once the Ethics Commission reaches a conclusion, all records of the Ethics Commission investigation are open records, even if the Ethics Commission concludes that the ethics complaint had no validity whatsoever. On the other hand, should the Ethics Committee determine by a majority of the members that there is a potential ethics violation, the Commission has the authority to refer a complaint to the Attorney General or a State's Attorney for further investigation and for consideration of criminal prosecution. If the Attorney General or State's Attorney decides not to prosecute, they shall provide the Ethics Commission with a written explanation for the decision not to prosecute. In addition to any applicable criminal penalty that may be imposed, the Ethics Commission may request the Attorney General or State's Attorney to seek a civil penalty not exceeding $10,000 to cover the expenses of the investigation of anyone found guilty of a criminal offense. The Ethics Commission can also request that removal proceedings from office be initiated against the person found guilty of violation of this section. May I continue, Mr. Speaker?
You may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the Assembly. Mr. Speaker, members of the Assembly, there are a number of items in House Bill 1442 that I have problems with. Number one, there appears to be a definite separation of powers problem in 1442. The North Dakota Constitution is clear in that we have 3 distinct separate branches of government: the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch. House Bill 1442 requires that the legislative branch appoint its own 4 members of the Ethics Commission, yet it requires the governor of the executive branch to appoint the other 5 members. None of these 5 members represent the executive branch, yet 3 of the governor's appointees represent the judicial branch. The question which begs an answer under the separation of powers doctrine is, what right and authority does the appointed Ethics Commission member have constitutionally to make rulings and decisions that will impact members of the 3 branches of government? The second problem that I see with House Bill 1442 is that of a due process for an accused person. The bill fails to require that an accused person, 1, is notified of an accusation against them, 2, is fully informed of the complaint, including the person making the complaint, and 3, is given the opportunity to face the accuser and to rebut the charges or accusations. House Bill 1442 allows the Ethics Commission to come to a conclusion without ever allowing the person who is accused of an ethics violation to know what the charge is, who brought the charge, or to defend himself or herself and offer the other side of the story. In other words, Mr. Speaker, the Ethics Committee is both the judge and the jury, and the accused is defenseless. Another problem with the bill is the fact that after the Ethics Commission concludes its investigation and finds that the ethics charge have no merit, the complaint in the investigation becomes an open record. The situation allows for the total character assassination of innocent people. Where does the innocent accused go to regain his or her reputation? I asked the governor's office if they were consulted on House Bill 1442 or asked for their input. The answer is no. I asked the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court if he was consulted for his input or viewpoints. His answer was also no. I asked the legislative majority leaders if they were asked for their input. Their answers were also no. In my opinion, Mr. Speaker, House Bill 1442 is a bill searching for a problem in North Dakota that doesn't exist. We were told in committee testimony that North Dakota ranks 43rd in ranking by one reporting agency. This agency is the Center for Public Integrity. What I learned by doing my own research about this organization is that it is funded by large donations from a gentleman named George Soros. Soros is a multi-billionaire left-wing political activist who was quoted by the Washington Post as saying that removing President Bush from office was the central focus of my life and a matter of life and death, end quote. The Center for Public Integrity ranked the #1 state for ethics to be New Jersey, even though when Governor Chris Christie was the United States Attorney for New Jersey, Before he became governor, he successfully prosecuted 134 of 134 cases of corruption of public officials in New Jersey. Mr. Speaker and members of the Assembly, I could go on and provide additional data regarding 1442. However, I believe you have enough of the facts about the problems with House Bill 1442 and why your Government and Veterans Affairs Committee urges to do not pass for House Bill 1442. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there any discussion? Representative Ammerman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Some of my friends out here might seem odd. I would stand up and support an ethics commission when I'd probably be its first customer. But anyway, there was I want to tell you about a gentleman that testified in committee, just one of our citizens from Dunn County. And he's one of the gentlemen that lost his mineral rights in the process that happened, and he was one of them that started the petition to convene a grand jury. And he testified he wishes that this commission would have been in place, because then they wouldn't have had to try to convene a grand jury. They would have had a place to take their complaint to. A few days back, we passed a bill that'll almost make it impossible for any citizen to convene a grand jury anymore. So we slammed that door in his face. And now he wishes that he had this, and you vote this down, we're going to slam this door in his face. There's got to be somewhere for our citizens to come. It's almost like we're wrapping a Kevlar cocoon around ourselves up in this body, and I just think we need to be careful, and this is one good piece of legislation, and I hope we can pass it. Thank you.
Is there further discussion? Representative Strinden.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members of the Assembly, I just have an anecdote to share with you. The afternoon after we heard this in Government and Veterans Affairs, one of the lobbyists came to my desk and showed me a threatening email from one of the legislators and asked if there was anything that she could do about it, if there was anything she should do about it. I'm not sure why she came to me, because obviously I'm a freshman. I told her you can take it to party leadership, but I don't know what they would do with it. You can bring it to the press, but there automatically is a character assassination. You can try to press charges, but that's a pretty serious first step to take. And so when we talk about these kinds of things not happening in North Dakota, I've been in the legislature for 36 days, and that was a pretty serious action by one of the legislators against a lobbyist. And that's just my first half a session. So thank you for letting me share.
Is there further discussion? Representative Mock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And 2371. I think even the Karnak the Magnificent would know that we're talking about House Bill 1442. So I think I stand up knowing where this bill is going to go. But for those who know me and have been working in the session, this has been an issue that's been pretty near and dear to my heart for a lot of reasons. And I would be doing myself and those who've worked on this legislation a disservice if I didn't even share a few remarks. Mr. Speaker and members of the Assembly, as I said, I know where this bill will end up. Pass or defeat, I believe we owe it to ourselves and to our constituents that we move a conversation of this type forward, whether it's through the passage of a bill or through a study or even just a good conversation among leaders, and figure out how we can make sure that as my colleague from Grand Forks, District 18 had said, that if those cases do come up, that there is a venue for that to be heard. I was a little disappointed last week, I believe, we voted against, or we passed 1451, which changed the grand jury process. I've had individuals ask me if there's a complaint, they see something going on that's wrong, unethical, potentially a violation, where do they go? Who's going to listen to them? When it comes to an elected official or a lobbyist, a government employee, those options are few and far between. In fact, short of a lawsuit or criminal charges, there's really nowhere. And now the grand jury process has been severely limited, so it can only apply to a felony, and it requires 40% of the population that voted for governor in that county. Even if it hasn't been used a lot, I think it says a lot. That's one less venue that you have. Mr. Speaker, I did a little looking around. Chapter 43 of our Century Code is related to occupations and professions. There are 65 occupations and professions that have their own board that will hear complaints of violations and misconduct and provide formal reprimand. 65. If your dentist executes malpractice, you have a place to bring that complaint and they can lose their license. Your barber is guarded under the same protection. Plumbers. And yet elected officials have no such oversight. Even earlier today, in House Bill 1441, we had discussion on the floor saying that there were some things that happened in this interim that caused some questions. In fact, I believe the state was that we've had some situations go on during the interim. You might call them scandals. You might just call them a need for oversight. They weren't related to legislators, but it was other state employees and to other agencies. I think we owe a little more oversight. And whether it's in 1442 or another commission that we can get together and work on, I think that's the venue for that. That the facts are heard, the opinions are weighed, and the truth comes out. And that we truly serve justice, not only in this chamber, but outside of it. Last thing I want to point out, a couple weeks ago, we passed 1164, related to financial institutions and oversight, transparency. Plenty of people spoke, said that it's a trust but verify, good government, it's what we need to do, prudent investment rules, you name it. Passed 92-1. 92-1. Mr. Speaker, I hold no illusions of grandeur, and I know what the vote will be. But I'm going to continue to work on this issue. And I hope that I can have a few more people join me and we can find a solution to problems that exist. They have been raised. We know where they are. They have been raised. That if there is a situation that occurs, that individual who has the complaint has the appropriate place to go. So, Mr. Speaker, members of the Assembly, I would love to see some green votes on this board. I hope that we can move this conversation forward. Being one of 3 states with no such oversight, I think this is a good venue. But whether this bill passes or fails, I certainly open my door to anyone in this chamber who wants to work on this issue, and we can start to address this problem together. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Carlson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the Assembly. As I listened to all these bills, and there was a whole long list of them, a few of them passed, most of them didn't, I tried to figure out, why do we want to know every dollar that somebody gives us in a campaign? And why do we want to know every dollar we spend? Is it about accountability? Or is it about a campaign plan? What's it about? And what's the problem with the $200 limit? Well, those bills didn't make it. But the point was there was no problem there. And we didn't need any further accounting. I don't believe that it's very difficult to raise money in this state as a candidate. And if you want to list every $25 you raise, pretty soon those people will stop giving you money if they're on a report somewhere as well. Because they're either going to get called or it'll be for political purposes. So most of these bills might be really good politics, but they weren't very good policy. And I think they were given the due that they deserved. I've been here 20 years. I never thought I'd be one of the senior legislators, stick around that long, but as you sit in this place those years, there's some with more experience. But I've been trying to think, where in the world have we had all these ethical problems? Who did something? If Representative Strinden mentioned that someone came with this email, let me tell you, if it had come to my desk and it came from one of my guys, I'd have done something with it. But I never saw it, because we don't act that way. We have a book here. You should probably read it. It starts on page 158. It talks about the ethics of being a legislator and the responsibilities we have and the public trust we have. There should be no question, if you see something done wrong, that you turn in that person. That's our responsibility as another legislator. It says it in the book. We shouldn't allow those things to happen. If there's bad things going on, people are doing things that are illegal or that are shady, we should turn them in and we should deal with them. Do we need a commission made up of 3 branches of government? I don't think so. But we have one thing that none of those others have. We have an election and a public to face. And in the end, they will decide about our ethical behavior. If it's bad, we won't be back. What happens if you get a DUI? Should that be brought to the ethical behavior? And you were rude to the police officer and you're an elected official? If you have financial problems and you don't pay your bills, should be brought up before the ethical commission? It's pretty vague. I would say no. I don't think it affected how you did your business in this chamber. But we could make a case that that would be there. So I've been really looking at all these, trying to figure out, and I have trouble tying it to the grand jury process. I don't, we're not supposed to tie it to other bills, but I don't see the tie there. But I've looked and searched my soul. What has been done wrong by the people that I've known in 20 years in this chamber? And I can't think of something that I'd want to have turned one of my fellow legislators in and said, you were really bad and you deserve punishment. Because we deface their character when they do that. I think if we see it as individuals, if we follow the book and the guidelines that are before us, and we're responsible to the people we work for, we don't need this, and I hope that we give this bill a do not pass.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the House has before it for final consideration House Bill 1442. The clerk will open the key and you may record your vote. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Key will be closed and clerk will take the record. The final vote shows 24 yeas, 70 nay, 0 absent, not voting. House Bill 1442 is declared failed. The House will be on the 17th order for announcements.